The Democratic Republic of Congo takes Rwanda to the International Court of Justice. Kinshasa seeks to hold Kigali responsible for the war in eastern DRC. But can international law help end one of Africa's longest-running conflicts? This is Inside Story. Hello there, I'm James Bays. For years, the DRC has accused Rwanda of direct involvement in the war in its eastern provinces. The Democratic Republic of Congo says its neighbour has mobilised forces and backed armed groups to carry out illegal operations in its territory. This week, Kinshasa has moved to hold Kigali accountable, filing a case with the International Court of Justice. DRC is seeking to force Rwanda to cease those activities and award reparations to victims and the government. Tension between the two are still high, and some countries outside the region are trying to help end the conflict. Could the involvement of the ICJ make a difference in those efforts? We'll talk to our panel of guests in a moment. But first, this report from Dmitry Medvedenko.
This is the third attempt by the Democratic Republic of Congo to take Rwanda to the UN's International Court of Justice. The DRC is accusing Rwanda of dispatching forces and backing armed groups it says have been committing crimes against civilians over the past 3 decades. Kinshasa says those include massacres, torture, sexual violence, and forced displacement. The DRC's application to the ICJ states the proceedings are with regard to a dispute concerning abuses attributable to Rwanda over a period extending from 1996 to the present day. According to the DRC, the abuses were committed as part of a campaign of genocide and serious widespread human rights violations waged by the Rwandan authorities in Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo. Rwanda has long denied it is backing any armed groups operating in the DRC. This includes the M23, the most prominent of the armed groups in the country. The United Nations has repeatedly stated that the M23 is supported by Rwanda.
The security situation in the east of the Democratic Republic of the Congo remains complex, volatile and devastating for the population. Intensive combat has continued between the Congo River Alliance, the M23 supported by the Rwandan Defence Forces, and the armed forces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the Wazalendo, and in certain areas, the Democratic Forces for the Liberation of Rwanda.
Violence in the DRC has caused millions of deaths since the late 1990s, according to the UN. It hasn't stopped despite ceasefire agreements mediated by Washington and Doha last year. The DRC earlier withdrew its first case against Rwanda in 2001, and the ICJ dismissed its second application in 2006, saying it lacked jurisdiction. The court could take up to 18 months to decide on jurisdiction in this case. If it is accepted, it could take several years to reach a final judgment. Dmitry Medvedenko, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
There is a lot to discuss, and some of it's very complex, but we have the right guest to explain it all to you today on Inside Story. Demas Kiprono is Executive Director at the International Commission of Jurists in Kenya. He joins us from Nairobi. Kambale Musavuli is in Accra, Ghana. He's an analyst at the Centre for Research on Congo-Kinshasa. And Phil Clark is a Professor of International Politics at SOAS at the University of London. He's in Cape Town. Thank you, all three of you, for joining us on Inside Story. Demas, if I can start with you. The International Court of Justice, that is part of the UN, one of the key parts, the legal part of the United Nations. The DRC has been wanting to launch this legal proceedings for some considerable time. How significant is it that they have now filed their case?
Thank you so much. It is very significant because of the atrocities that are happening in Eastern Congo and the alleged involvement of foreign governments. The DRC tried to file a communication to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights in 1999, and later Rwanda backed out of the protocol, Article 34.6, that gives the African Commission jurisdiction. Then Congo tried to file a case with the African Court of Justice, and that attempt also failed. And then in 2002, the country also filed a case with the International Court of Justice, and the court found that there are certain conventions that Rwanda was not part of, and so they did not have jurisdiction. However, going forward, I think this case is important because the violations are systemic, are continuing. This is the worst humanitarian issue that has happened in the world. There have been 6 million deaths since the first and second Congo wars and the renewed conflict in 2021, which means that this is only second to World War II in terms of death and destruction. And what the ICJ needs to do is to, first of all, really ground itself in terms of what is going on. It has international jurisdiction, and there are international crimes that have happened in Congo, and they now must decide whether the allegations are perhaps true or not. But it is very significant because of the devastation and the transnational crimes that are happening. However, we should also remember that Eastern Congo and Congo itself is quite a rich resource country. They are very rich in resources, but poor in governance, and this has led to a lot of international actors coming in and basically taking advantage of the situation.
Okay, we'll do some of that context, Demas, a little later in the programme. But Phil, staying for now with the submission that DRC has made to the International Court of Justice. Let me quote. They say Rwanda has conducted a, quote, campaign of genocide and serious, widespread human rights violations. And one of the other things I thought was interesting in the submission is they seem to be using Rwanda's own words against it, something that was said by a Rwandan government official back in March 2026, this year, in response to US Treasury sanctions. The quote was, Rwanda is fully committed to disengagement of its forces. That's an admission that Rwanda's been there.
Indeed. And Rwanda has danced around this issue for a very long time, denying either that they were backing the M23 rebels who are wreaking havoc in Eastern Congo at the moment, denying that Rwandan forces themselves, the army has been across the border. And I think the whole world now knows that Rwanda is very heavily involved in this conflict. I think that Congo has learned a great deal from the South African submission to the ICJ around the Gaza case, in which we saw that submission center on things that the Israeli government and the Israeli Defense Forces had said. And I think Congo's submission to the ICJ in relation to Rwanda draws a lot on that experience. They're as much as possible trying to use Rwanda's own words. But I think there are two other reasons why Congo taking this case to the ICJ is really telling and surprising in some senses. The first is one that your package has already mentioned, which is that Congo tried exactly this at the ICJ in relation to Rwanda in 2002, and in 2006, the ICJ threw that case against Rwanda out. The second significance here is that this submission comes during ongoing peace talks between the DRC government and the government of Rwanda, a very delicate moment of diplomacy between the two states. And I guess Congo is taking a risk here that in proceeding with the ICJ, they may in fact jeopardize this peace process that's ongoing with Rwanda. So I think this timing is very significant, but it's also very surprising to many people who've been watching this region closely.
Kambale, for more than a decade, I was the lead correspondent for Al Jazeera covering the United Nations. The ICJ is part of the United Nations. I spent time in the court in The Hague. And the one thing that you learn very quickly about the ICJ is it moves incredibly slowly, the process of international justice. So how will this be seen, do you think, in DRC, Rwanda and the region? People may have high hopes, but they'll be waiting a very long time.
Indeed. I mean, the Congolese people will never give up their fight to have justice for the millions who have died. If you remember, if you look at the UN Mapping Exercise report, one of the key crimes in that report is the crime of 1998, 1997-98 in Tingi-Tingi, right? What we usually refer to as the Garreton reports, documenting already around that time the massacre of civilians, Congolese, Hutu refugees by the Rwandan forces who were helping in toppling Mobutu. So when that report came out around that time, and nothing was done, it created what I see as a culture of impunity, right? So since 1998, we've known that war crimes were being committed, and some of them could mount to genocide already then. So because it was not addressed, this culture has continued that as we speak to you today in 2026, the same crimes are still being committed. So for the victims of the conflict, if it's going to take us 100 years to have justice, that's what it will take, but they will not stop in speaking. So I understand that we can frame it around the Congolese government pushing for justice, but there are many civil society organizations, many lawyers, many survivors of the conflict whom I've met who continue to say never stop speaking up for the crimes that have taken place in the Congo. So for us, this is a step in the right direction. It will take a long time, but we will not stop until we get justice for the Congolese victims.
Justice for the Congolese victims, Demas, but it is worth explaining to our viewers how this system works, because the International Court of Justice, as I mentioned earlier on, is a key part of the United Nations. It's where countries sue other countries. We're not going to get individuals prosecuted here. We're not going to get individuals serving sentences. And enforcement in the International Court of Justice, they don't have their own police force or army. They then rely on the UN Security Council.
Yes, indeed. And from where I see it, I think the ICJ itself, the International Court of Justice, just like the South Africa case on Gaza, is going to really have a strategic impact in terms of sensitizing and making pronouncements regarding what is happening in Congo. And that has its own effect in terms of allowing the global community to really pay attention to what is going on. And so, as you've said, they do not have their own enforcement arm, but their decisions have a significant strategic impact in terms of making certain declarations and pushing other countries to also implement to deal with the Congo and Rwanda in terms of changing what is happening. As I said earlier, there's a lot of transnational issues that are going on there in terms of trade, in terms of minerals, and what the ICJ would potentially say or proclaim would affect Rwanda's conduct towards Congo. Yeah.
Kambale, how is international justice viewed by ordinary people in the Democratic Republic of Congo? Because you have this, the International Court of Justice now involved, but you've had the International Criminal Court. That's the one that tries individuals involved in the past. And I think the most notorious example is a gentleman called Thomas Lubanga. He was convicted of war crimes back in 2012. He served his time, he was released, and he is back heading one of the armed groups in the DRC again, surrounded again by child soldiers.
Yes, I mean, the International Court of Justice or the ICC itself, in the enforcement, they actually lack the enforcement force. Even though we have the situation with Lubanga now leading the M23, we can't stop international mechanism to have justice for the Congolese. So I'll use the example of the ICJ to put that in the context. The DRC did take Uganda to the ICJ, and the ICJ did find Uganda liable for war crimes and other crimes they committed, and actually ordered Uganda to pay $300 million of reparation. It's not enough, but it's still a step in the right direction. So the call for from the DRC is to have Rwanda also pay for reparations. But if you speak to me now, speaking from the think tank I'm working with, the Center for Research on the Congo, our perspective from day one has been the same. In 2010, the UN High Commission for Human Rights published a report called the UN Mapping Exercise Report. It documented 617 allegations of crimes committed in Congo, the most serious violation of human rights and international humanitarian law. And in this report said that what's happening in the Congo are war crimes, crimes against humanity, and possible genocide if proven in the competent court. The same report gave a framework for justice for the Congolese, multiple formulas on how Congo could have justice. What the civil society in the Congo have called for is an international tribunal for DRC, based in DRC, and why in another international tribunal where people said they will be funding, we know what has happened in the past, is because the victims are saying that they want to see those who committed the crimes in the court in DRC, not the court outside of DRC. And the international mechanism will allow for countries, party to the court, to be able to transfer those who committed crimes who may not be in DRC. So we know what we want in DRC in terms of justice, while we are still using all means, all instruments available to us for justice. So that's the context. We know that the ICC and the ICJ may have a difficult time, but we will use all instruments available to us to bring about peace and stability in DRC.
Phil, as you mentioned earlier on, these efforts at international justice have to coexist with a very difficult path of diplomacy. We had African efforts at diplomacy led by African leaders in DRC. The current efforts seem to be in two tracks, one led by the US, one led by Qatar. Can you tell us exactly how that is working or not working?
It's been a very difficult last 18 months of international diplomacy, and I think the only way we could describe these two processes is that neither of them has made very much progress. Neither the Washington progress, which is between Rwanda and the DRC, nor the Doha process, which is between the DRC and the M23.
And it's worth, just to interrupt you briefly, Phil, it is worth saying this is one of the wars that President Trump says he's already solved.
Indeed. According to Washington, there is no conflict in Eastern Congo. It's all done and dusted. But of course, that would be news to the hundreds of thousands of everyday Congolese that are still living with an ongoing conflict. So we've seen this very fraught peace process. My view from day one has been that we were unlikely to see very much progress in these two domains. If anything, they need to be a single process. These three actors, Rwanda, the DRC, and the M23 rebels all need to sit around the same table in order to secure peace. The other problem that we have, particularly in the case of the US, is that the US has said that they'll only do a deal between Rwanda and the DRC if the US itself benefits from some of the natural resources in Eastern Congo at the moment. So they've made this very much a transactional peace process. It's a peace process that's being mediated by an actor that has a vested economic interest in this very situation. So this ICJ case comes at a very difficult time in these peace processes. One other thing I would emphasize here, and I agree really with everything that Demas and Kambale have said, but I think there's one thing perhaps to add to what Kambale has said is we shouldn't forget the fact that for sure, Rwanda has played a really damaging role and has, in my view, committed very serious crimes in Congo since the late 1990s. But in fact, the greatest damage, the hugest death toll to Eastern Congolese civilians is as a result of the Congolese state. The greatest perpetrator in Eastern Congo in the last 30 years is the Congolese government itself. And if we see a serious process at the ICJ, it will also put a spotlight back on the role of the Congolese army and the entire Congolese government infrastructure. Either that has been directly carried out by the Congolese army against civilians, or it has been the Congolese army supporting groups like the Hutu-dominated FDLR, who have been targeting Tutsi civilians in eastern DRC. And that's the kind of thing that really worries the government in Kigali. So certainly it is right that there is a legal and diplomatic spotlight on Rwanda's role in Eastern Congo, but equally there needs to be a spotlight on the role of the Congolese government itself. And Congo, in fact, is opening itself up to some fairly major international legal scrutiny by opening this case at the ICJ. So that's the kind of risk that the Congolese state is taking in The Hague at the moment.
Demas, as you told us earlier on, there is a history in this conflict of plunder by outside countries of DRC's mineral resources. Do you trust the US in its role right now? Worth adding to what we just heard from Phil, there are widespread reports that Eric Prince, who was the founder of Blackwater, that controversial mercenary company that was operating in Iraq, he signed a contract with the Ministry of Finance of the DRC, a so-called minerals for security deal.
Yes, indeed. The pain in the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo has been its resources and the transactional nature of engagement, especially with the world powers. And so in the 2000s, when perhaps the US was thinking about how to control conflict minerals, the Dodd-Frank Act was passed, I believe, in 2010, that would really look at the supply chain and ensure that when minerals are sourced by corporations, that they are clean. However, soon after that, the biggest actor became China in terms of who is purchasing the minerals. And it's sad to say that almost all of us use equipment, computers, laptops, phones that were sourced probably in Congo. And so the problem really is that the world has not paid enough attention. Congo, unfortunately, is overshadowed by all other things that happen in the world. And so that we do not realize that we are sort of complicit in what's going on. And as you've said, and as the good professor said, the US has explicitly said that it's dealing with Congo and actually also other African countries in a transactional manner, so that they, in any mediation that they're doing, they're looking at what they're getting out of it. And what is lost in the source is the people of Congo, the human rights violations, the killings, the rapes, and the plunder.
Kambale, we're talking about these very important issues of legality and diplomacy. But we can't leave out the reality for the people of Congo. 26.5 million people, according to the World Food Programme, do not have enough food. That's 1 in 4 people in DRC. And now, of course, you have Ebola.
And I want to add also a very important element. Norway, so I'm taking us away from Africa for a second. Norway is a resource-rich country. I haven't heard Sweden invade Norway for its natural resources, right? So I do understand that the conflict is based around the pilfering of Congo's resources. But there is an element around the criminality, right? The death toll that we really need to explain to viewers that it does not necessarily mean that if you have to get access to resources, human beings have to die. And that's the conversation, not just for the Congo, that we have to think about even in the global stage. Why over 6 million Congolese have died since 1996, right? I believe it's really because there is no accountability for the crimes taking place in Congo. I believe that the Eric Prince of the world can decide to wake up one day and say, I'm going to make a deal to make money to protect some mineral assets, not the civilians, right? So for the Congolese, we see it through, it's been ongoing for the past 30 years. 1996, it's been 30 years that we have lived this. But we know the path to peace, right? Yes, we have Ebola taking place in DRC. But Congo has had 17 epidemics. We have some of the best doctors that can deal with it. But then there is a confusion with the international donors and actually listening to the voices of the frontline workers, right? That's one aspect. The inadequacy of the Congolese government.
Can I bring in Phil again, just to come back to this latest court case? Do you think it's going to make the path to peace and then ultimately the situation for the people of DRC easier or harder?
I think in the immediate, the court case complicates the peace process. This is a justifiable act by the Congolese state, I think, to open this case at the ICJ, but it will be seen as a belligerent act within the context of the peace process. Rwanda will say to Congo, look, you're trying to talk peace, you're trying to negotiate here, but at the same time, you're trying to deal with us legally in one of the highest profile international courts that there is. That's an aggressive legal act. So it will hamper the peace process. But let's also be honest, that this peace process has been stumbling anyway. My view has been for a long time, we need a complete reset on the diplomatic front. We need a new set of mediators, a new set of negotiators. We in many respects, need to start from scratch. I actually think the most likely, the most effective mediator is a neighboring state. It's Angola. The one African state that has the trust both of Kigali and Kinshasa is the Angolan government. And there was an Angolan process that was beginning to make some progress about 2 years ago. The parties were then whisked off. The process ended up in Washington, and we've ended up with, I think, a really ham-fisted negotiation. So irrespective of what's happening in the ICJ, I think we need a reset on the peace front anyway. We need to change the tone. We need to change the temperature. There needs to be a sense that there is the possibility here of a settlement between these two states.
Okay, Phil, there have been so many processes, but let's hope at least there is some hope for DRC in the future. Thanks to our guests, Demas, Kiprono, Kambale, Musavuli and Phil Clark. Remember, you can always find our daily programme on your phone where you can watch or listen. We have an audio podcast version too, or look for us on YouTube or on our website, aljazeera.com. We'd love to hear from you. Go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story, or on X. There we are at AJ Inside Story. For now, that's it from me, James Bays, and the team here. But stay tuned. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment.